This is the scariest episode from my childhood. It took place in 1991 when I was 8 years old. I lived in a village in the Norwegian countryside with my parents and 2 older brothers. There weren't many kids around for us to play with, so we always stuck together, despite the age difference. I was 8, and my brothers were 10 and 12. It was a safe neighborhood, and we were outdoorsy kids. It was fine for us to just return home to eat and then go back out again to play in the woods or go fishing in the nearby lake. In the autumn of 1991, my oldest brother dared us to sneak through the hedge to the abandoned property that was located nearby. We had always thought of it as a haunted house, but really it was the house where the man who started the village brick factory once lived. No one had lived there for ages, and the paint was starting to peel off, and several windows were broken. Our parents would tell us to never go there. The reason was, of course, that they feared we would get hurt playing there, but we thought it was because it was haunted. But that day we dared to walk around in the garden, or whatever you want to call it. I had a now dried up pond, an old well, several old and dying fruit trees, and even tools and an old shed. It looked as if someone had just walked out one day and never returned, leaving everything as it was. We soon came to think of the garden as ours and played there all the time. We climbed the trees and used the tools to build things. It was great. Our own secret playground. We suspected that people in the village had seen us because soon our parents would ask us if we had gone there, despite it being strictly forbidden, which of course we denied, but somebody must have complained. We were rather loud and untamed kids, right? Until one day, it was in November. I remember since it was the days before my birthday. It was a damp and rainy day, and we weren't really in the mood for playing outside. But our mom had chased us out of the house so she could clean in peace, and we weren't allowed back until an hour later. So we decided to try and open the old cellar. I'm not sure what the word is in English for this kind of cellar, but imagine, if you will, a hatch that opens almost horizontally to the ground, then a few steps that lead you down into a dugout cellar with stone walls and earth floor. It was used to store vegetables and such, but was empty now. All of us climbed down to have a look. The plan was to write our names on the inside of the cellar and mark it as our own. Suddenly the hatch slammed shut above us and the cellar became completely dark. I started screaming and my older brothers tried to open the hatch. When my oldest brother, Sindre, pushed the hatch open, he saw a man's hand holding a small axe. "Come on out, trespassing little brats," the voice growled, the axe close to the opening of the hearth. "Heck no," Sindre shouted back and slammed the hatch shut from the inside. "All right, little brats, I know you're all in there, all 3 of you little shits. Does your mom know where you are? Does she? I bet she doesn't. Nobody will look for you here." We heard him dropping the axe and started to move around with something else. Soon we realized that he had taken out a hammer, and before we knew it, he had started to nail the hatch closed. I throw myself at the hatch, determined to get out, but the moment the hatch opened just a tiny bit, he reached for the axe. "Come on now. Come on out. It's the better choice, really. It must be awfully dark and damp in there. Aren't you afraid of the dark? Go on, let your little brother out." He laughed, and we could hear that he was drunk. My older brother, Emil, was pleading with the man to let us go, promising that we would never return, but his words fell on deaf ears. The rain had started to fall really heavily now, and we heard thunder outside. The drunk man with the hammer was cursing and moving around outside, clearly bothered by the bad weather. "I might come back to let you out one day, or maybe I'll butcher all 3 of you," he whispered through the wooden door as he hammered the hatch shut. We were terrified to do or say anything, but Sindre told us to keep calm and it would be okay. He was surely just out to scare us. The dark was compact inside the cellar, and it was cold and damp. After a long while of silence from the man outside, we started to wonder if he had left. Sindre decided that we should count to 100 and then try to get out. We counted loudly and then used our hands to find the hatch. It was definitely nailed shut. Sindre told us to feel the stone walls for a loose stone, and we did, cutting our palms up on the sharp edges. Eventually we did find one, and it was surprisingly easy to remove it from its place. The cellar was old and had not been tended to for ages, and the rainy climate of the Norwegian coast had left the wooden hatch doors rather soft with age. The hardest thing was to reach up. The cellar was built in such a way that it was almost impossible to get a good forward motion going in order to break the wood. But fueled by panic and adrenaline, we broke the lower half open. Being closest to the ground, it was softer and easier to tear apart. We started digging the earth with our hands, creating a small opening. Being the smallest, my brothers pushed me out of the cellar, and I would see that the man was indeed gone. My brothers were too big to fit in the small opening, and Sindre said I would have to get the hammer and get the hatch open. I was absolutely terrified the man would come back with the axe and I would have to run, leaving my brothers to die, or stay and be slaughtered. At 8 years old, I had no doubt that's what would have happened. I got the hammer, but I couldn't get the nails out, so I used the hammer to simply break the hatch to pieces. Soon we were all running for dear life across the garden and home, where our mom threw a fit over the state of our clothes and hands and demanded to know what we had been up to. Nothing, we lied, unsure of what to say. We never went back there again, and we never even looked that way. The man with the axe? Have no idea who he was or where he came from. I wonder if he was a drifter living in the abandoned house, not wanting noisy kids to disturb the peace. This is by far the most fearful episode of my life this far. We never told anyone about it, but every year, when Sindre, Emil, and I reunite at the family home for Christmas, we like to ask if there is any news about the old ghost house down the street. Did anyone move in there yet? This happened when I was in my early teens in the late 80s. My family lived in a very secluded forested area. We had a long driveway, and our small home sat on a square acre of mowed grass with woods on 2 sides. I was alone late one night, talking with a buddy from my school. I often rode my bike to town over the summer, and he invited me to come over and spend the night. It was a 20-mile trip over completely empty country roads, but it was always an adventure, and I'd seldom hesitated to go when I had a place to stay. I told him. It was a sure thing. I'd call my mother at work and then start my ride. Here's where it gets creepy. Once I hung up the phone and started getting dressed, in all black by the way, I picked up the phone again to call Mom. The line was dead. This had never happened before. It was a sturdy rotary phone, and we never had any problems with it at all. My thoughts instantly went to the small phone box on the back of the house. It was a tiny round junction with nothing but a rubber covering. Behind the cover was the exposed connection between the phone pole and our inside line. The wires were twisted together and capped out, but completely vulnerable. I questioned why I would even think about that. Why would I jump to conclusions about the cause of the dead line? I was overwhelmed with a feeling of dread that didn't make sense, and I was wrestling with my thoughts. I decided to behave as though I were in real danger, but calm myself by focusing on how unlikely it was and how my imagination was probably getting the best of me. But I could not shake the feeling that I was in trouble. I finished dressing and strapped the buck knife to my hip. The old Rambo knives with the compass in the stock. It was cheap but very big. I moved quietly and planned how I would leave the house. I remember this very well. I would slide out the front door and pull it closed behind me, locked. I would not be able to get back in. I would grab my bike from against the wall on the enclosed porch, spin around and use my elbow to press the button of the handle on the screen door and jump down the concrete steps. I'd hop on my bike and speed down the drive. It was very dark outside, but there were bright lights in the front and rear of the house that created big pools in the yard. That's all the light I would have. I executed my maneuver just as I planned, but my elbow slipped off the button on the handle and banged into the door as it opened, and within seconds I was pumping down the gravel drive. I turned my head to my left, filling my ears with the roar of air I was cutting through, and stopped pedaling, my eyes fixed on the rear of the house. I was 100% sure somebody was coming. I don't know how or why. It was only a moment, but I didn't look away despite my own skepticism. At the last instant, I saw him. A man wearing dark clothing and a ski mask came tearing out of the lit yard around the back of the house and plunged into the deep shadow along the side, heading for the front where I had only been seconds ago. I was invisible, wearing black from head to toe, and instead of running straight for me, he went for the porch where the commotion I just made had come from. I turned forward and leaned into the pedals. I could barely see the driveway, but I had ridden my bike down it many times at night, and I could make out the large stone gate post before the dirt road. I almost wrecked turning the corner, but recovered and sped away. About a mile further, and I finally stopped at the intersection of a paved road. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my forehead was sweaty. I stood there for a bit and got my breathing under control while I tried to digest what just happened. My thoughts were racing. I knew damn well what I saw, but I was out of danger. All I could do was press on. My neighbors were Amish. No phone. I wouldn't have known what to say anyway. When I got to my friend's house much later, I told him what happened and called my mother. She listened and didn't give me a hard time, but I could tell she didn't know what to think. She wouldn't be home until morning and said that she would be careful, and that was it. I had heard laughter once from the edge of the woods, and things in the yard had been moved on occasion, but no one else had these experiences, and I assumed it was backwards, Amish kids fooling around. Nothing had ever really happened before. I doubt Amish kids would know how to disconnect a phone line, though. Growing up, I lived in a small farmhouse set on 2 acres. Although it wasn't a working farm, we did have an assortment of animals over the years. My mother was a vet and also spent a lot of time rehoming and caring for the sick, abused, or neglected animals. It was a peaceful place with the happy hum of birdsong and wildlife to remind you that you weren't in the city. There was a walking trail through the wooded area behind our property. During the warmer months, tourists, hikers, and campers would frequently use it. I was a bookworm and used to spend a lot of time in our barn. It was set toward the back of the property along the fence line, and it was quiet. Tending to the animals and reading all my books in there took up a lot of time, so I would often hear people talking and laughing as they stomped along the trail. When I was like 10 years old, I usually returned home from school about an hour before my mother finished work. I was a mature kid, and she knew that she could trust me to catch the bus home and start on my chores. This particular day, I hopped off the school bus, let myself in the front gate, and trudged up the dirt driveway to the house. While inside, I fixed myself an after-school snack, good old-fashioned PB&J and glass of milk. I took my snack with me out the back door and made my way toward the barn. I knew my afternoon routine like the back of my own hand. Right at that very second, our dogs should have been running up to greet me as they usually did, barking and circling around my legs, bums wiggling all happily. On this day, I couldn't see them anywhere. I called for them and they didn't come, but I did hear muffled barking start up from the barn. That was really weird because we never locked them in the barn. During the day, they were outside, and at night they would sleep inside with us. I put my sack down on top of the old tree, stump nearby, and went to open the barn to check on the dogs. The 3 of them rushed out and greeted me happily. They were fine. From the door, I quickly glanced around the interior of the barn. There was no one in there, quiet as usual. Maybe my mother had locked them in that morning for some reason, or maybe the wind had blown the barn door shut and the dogs had been inside. I wasn't too concerned though. I retrieved my sack and settled on a hay bale inside. The dog sat at my feet as I shared my little bits of sandwich with them. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a tall, skinny guy with long, messy gray hair walk straight by the entrance to the barn. I could hear him making strange babbling sounds. It sounded like he was talking in tongues. Strangely, my dogs barely reacted. They looked back at the door, wagged their tails a couple of times, and focused straight back on my sandwich. This was not normal. My dogs would usually react to a stranger on the property. A tiny bit of fear nagged at my stomach, but not too much because I was a kid and my dog seemed happy. I tiptoed to the doorway and peeked around it to get a better look at him. He was really tall and so skinny that his ribs and spine were quite visibly jutting out. His hair was a rat's nest and so was his beard. He was now bent over our chicken coop, searching inside for eggs, I assume. He pulled an egg out and ceased babbling as he studied it for the longest time. He said something to the egg that I couldn't hear, then put the whole thing in his mouth and chomped down on it. He was missing his front teeth, and the yellow yolk ran down his chin and neck from his misshapen mouth. I could see him grinding his jaw to crunch on the shell. I wanted to throw up, or scream, or both, but I was frozen, watching as he devoured a raw egg, shell and all. When I snapped out of it, I screamed so loud that the man turned his head to look at me. He didn't react. He just kept on eating, teeth grinding and all, yolk flowing, staring intensely. I bolted from the barn, across the soggy green lawn, up the back wooden steps, and into the house. I slammed the door shut and locked it behind me. My heart was beating wildly against my ribcage. I was terrified for my dogs, feeling guilty for leaving them out there with this guy. I pulled the corner of the little white curtain back from the window on the door and peeked out to see if they were okay. The weird man was just standing there in the middle of the yard, staring intensely at the back door, as my dog licked bits of raw egg from his fingertips. I started shaking really bad at this point. He was friendly with my dogs. They didn't see him as a threat. I was not safe. I needed to call for help. As I went for the phone, I could hear him begin to babble loudly again. With shaking fingers, I dialed my mother's work number. The babbling was getting closer and louder. I trembled harder and harder. I could barely speak when my mother answered, but I managed to choke out that I needed help and there was a man on the property. She told me to go downstairs, lock myself in my bedroom, and hide under the bed until either she or a police officer came to get me. She promptly hung up on me and called the police. The man was stomping up the back steps now, babbling nonstop, and began to bash on the door. I bolted upstairs to my bedroom, locked the door as directed, and wiggled myself under the bed. I made sure not even a toe was poking out as I lay there hoping that I wouldn't die. It would be school holidays in a few weeks, and I didn't want to be dead for that. The weird guy made his way around the outside of the house. I could hear him bashing on windows, babbling through noises of frustration and screaming unintelligible phrases at what I assumed was me. This guy wanted in, and I was just waiting for the shattering of a glass window or the kicking in the back door. Fear does strange things to your memory. I don't even know how long I was hiding and listening to him for. It didn't feel like too long though, because the next thing I remember is the police arriving. I could hear them talking to the guy and asking him questions. He didn't respond to their questions, but the babbling sound seemed panicked and louder. I decided to creep downstairs and look through the window, feeling much safer now. I could see my mother running down our dirt driveway. She looked panicked as she bursted into the house to get me. She wouldn't stop hugging and kissing me as the police questioned me, and it was embarrassing. The backup they called for arrived, and the police took the guy with them to the station. Before they left, they assured my mother that they would be in touch to let her know what would happen from there. She seemed pretty intent on pressing charges. A week later, the same 2 police officers came back to our house. They explained that the guy on our property had been secretly living in our barn at night and hiding in the woods during the day for a couple of months now. Many people had seen him on the trail during the summer as they walked it. He was homeless and usually harmless. That explained why the dogs weren't worried about him being on the property. He had befriended them. He had all kinds of mental disorders and a history of being in and out of the hospital. He had gone off his medication and experienced a mental break while hiding out on our property. They explained that the guy had started to hide in our barn only when the weather had started getting cooler, as he had nowhere else to go. His elderly mother had died a few years earlier, and he had no caretaker to look out for him. He was a sick man just trying to survive. The story ends 27 years later at his funeral. The man, who we will call Jim, got the help he needed with the support of my mother. He went back on his medication and disability pension. My mother helped to find him a small place in town and made the security payment on it so he could rent it. Jim became a volunteer on our property, helping my mother and me tend to the animals, and eventually he got a few paid hours a week at the vet clinic, helping to clean and maintain the site. It wasn't always smooth sailing. Jim indeed was a sick man, and sometimes he could have episodes, but for the most part, the last half of his life turned out to be pretty good. He gained friends in town, support from his community, a job and a home, and people who were always around to look out for him. We buried our friend Jim last week. For somebody who started out scaring the heck out of us and who had nothing and no one in his life, he made a lasting impact on all of us, especially the animals that he loved so much. Sometimes you think you never want to encounter a creepy person again, and most of the time you're probably right in feeling that way. But Jim really deserved a second chance. He wasn't a malicious person, he just needed a helping hand back to normalcy. One night when I was around 16, I received a call from an unknown number. "Hello?" I said. Then all I heard was heavy breathing. Then the person on the other end hung up. I figured it was a wrong number and I continued watching TV. The phone rang again though. "Hello?" I said. More heavy breathing. "Who is this?" "I know where you live." I started to panic a little and say, "Hey, just stop calling me." Then I hang up. As soon as I hung up, they called again. I ignored like 5 or 6 more calls and finally picked up the phone again. "Hey man, I'm sure you're enjoying prank calling me, but please stop." The guy on the other end was laughing. "I'm in your house," he said. Then he hung up again. Every hair on my body stands up and I creep to my door. My room was the renovated garage, so it opened into the kitchen, and the living room was directly to my right. I open my bedroom door and step out to make sure the doors are locked. The living room door was wide open. After about 10 seconds of being frozen in fear, I bolt to the knife block and grab the largest knife I can find, then proceed to creep through the house, turning on all the lights as I went. I made it to my dad's room and shook him awake. The look on his face when he saw me standing over him with the butcher knife is funny in hindsight. I whisper, "Someone's in the house." He immediately jumped up and grabbed the loaded revolver from his underwear drawer. I stayed close behind him as we crept through the house to my room. He checked my closet and under the bed. As he was looking, I explained exactly what happened. He grabbed a flashlight and decided to look down our driveway. We lived in the country and our driveway was pretty damn long. He shines the light down the driveway and suddenly takes off running, yelling, "Get back here, you piece of crap." Later, he told me that he had seen a man in a hoodie pop out of the bushes and start hauling ass down the driveway. He didn't catch him and we never found out who it was or what they wanted. We told the police, but there obviously wasn't much they could do. So this happened about 1.5 years ago. I moved to Los Angeles 3 years ago, the first time living on my own, and I love it. Even with everything that happened, I still love living here. So I'm a smoker. On average, about 3 to 4 cigarettes a day, so thankfully I'm only at a pack like every 5 or 6 days. Whatever, math isn't my strong suit. Anyways, I live in a non-smoking building, so I have to step outside when I want to smoke. The first time I saw this guy, he was outside my building, sitting next to the dumpster. No big deal, you know, probably just another neighbor I hadn't met. His name is Oz. The first time I saw Oz, I was having a cigarette outside, and he just glanced over at me every once in a while. But that's it. 2 days later, it's like 11:30 p.m. and I'm heading downstairs. I look at the lobby of the building and see someone underneath a blanket behind some chairs. I see a cord going behind the blanket bulge, so I immediately assume someone's in the doghouse for the night and charging their phone. I have my smoke, head back upstairs, and go to sleep. A week later, it's the middle of the day. I've gotten some work done and I decide to take a smoke break. I go and sit outside like I always do. Oz is sitting outside as well. This time he's got some paperwork with him. Like a lot. I feel like I should provide a description of Oz. He's about 6 feet tall, early to mid-30s. Has medium length hair that has been styled into dreadlocks. A full but short beard, if that makes sense. He was wearing worn down pants and jackets. Based on his face, he seemed like he cleaned himself up regularly, but his clothes made him look homeless, and sadly he was. I fully believe that no matter who you are, everyone should have a home and a roof over their head. Everyone. So Oz is going over the paperwork in his hands when he looks over at me and says hi, so I respond in kind because why the heck not, right? I'm an average height guy for additional context. But I'm also horror movie skinny. He then asked me how I'm doing today. I'm doing pretty good, I respond. How about you? I'm good, man. I'm good. Good. It's a nice day, right? Yeah, it sure is. So when are you moving? Now that question came out of nowhere. Was he hoping to find a new place to live? Was he trying to move into this building? Was that what his paperwork was all about? I mean, if he's moving into a new apartment, great. I hope life works out well for him, but why was he asking me when I'm moving out? I know the building at the time had a vacancy or two, so if he was going to move in, why ask a question like that? Why make it sound like he's waiting for someone to move out so he can have a spot? My brain asked all those questions in less than a second of Oz asking me that. After a couple more seconds of being stunned by Oz's question, I just said, yeah, I'm not moving anytime soon, man. At that point, it was time to go home and rethink my life. Another week later, I go see a friend stand up set, and when I get back to my apartment at like 10 p.m., I see 2 police SUVs outside my building with lights on. I go on inside because if there are 2 police vehicles already there, I can't do anything, so I might as well stay out the way. The cops are talking to one of my downstairs neighbors, and I can't catch anything they're talking about. 2 days later, notices have been put up next to the mailboxes that say, "This man is not allowed in this building." They have a photo of Oz. Turns out the blanket bulge I saw was actually Oz, when he somehow managed to get inside the building and sleep in the lobby with an electric blanket. A couple months go by and I don't see him. I honestly forgot about him at this point. When finally one day, Oz is there again, sitting outside the building with somehow even more paperwork. This time when he sees me, he's almost immediately hostile. "So, when are you getting out of here?" "What?" "I want my apartment back, man." "I don't know what you're talking about," I said. "You stole my apartment and I want it back." I was so confused by this. I snuffed my cigarette out and went back into the building. This exchange pretty much repeated itself every few days for the next 2 weeks, each time making me more and more uncomfortable. On weekdays, I would get home very late, like anywhere between 11:30 and 2 a.m. Oz never had a predictable pattern to his appearances, so I started getting really nervous about going home. Like I wanted to avoid going home so I could avoid getting accosted by Oz. Finally, one Saturday after lunch, I step outside and have a smoke. Oz is there, and this time he's mad. He's saying that if I don't get out of his apartment by the end of the day, he'll get me. That shook me a lot. I got back inside and stayed there. Around midnight, I decided to step outside and have another smoke, hoping against hope that Oz isn't there. But lo and behold, he is. He's sitting by the dumpster again, and I go the opposite direction to inhale smoke. About halfway through my cigarette, I see Oz go up the stoop and stand in front of the door to the building. Great. When my cigarette is done, I head to the stairs to get into my building. Oz steps back to block me from getting to the door. "Excuse me," I say as I try to go past him, but he stops me. "You aren't getting in here," he says. "Why?" "Because you don't live here." "Yes, I do." "No, you don't, man. You don't live here." "Yes, I do live here. Now please move out of the way." Kill him with kindness, you know? Maybe if I stay kind, he'll let me go. But no, he doubled down. Nah, dude, you can't get in here because you don't live here. For the last time, I do live here. Prove it, man. You got paperwork? Yes, I do. I have a lease. Where? I was getting really irritated at this point, so my answers started becoming really cold. Like, I was getting pretty rude to this guy. I don't carry it with me everywhere I go. Now move aside and let me in. No, you need to get the heck out of here. Move, I said. Nah, you need to get out of here now or I'm calling my security team. No, you need to move or I'm calling the cops, I said. Do it, man. My security guys are already on their way. They're going to mess you up. At this point, I was already stepping away from the door and pulling out my phone. I called the non-emergency number because in the moment I didn't feel threatened by Oz, but I should have called the regular dispatch instead of non-emergency. Cops get there about a half hour later and Oz was still there. Cops generally make me very nervous, but when getting out of their car, one cop was holstering their nightstick and dropped it on the ground, then holstered it properly. Just that little moment relaxed me more than any amount of cigarettes could have. The two cops that showed up separated and talked to Oz and me separately. I tell my cop that I was just trying to get back into my building and he's blocking me. He's been harassing me lately, saying I need to move out. Oz, however, had a very different story. He claimed that I stole his apartment from him, stole his credit cards, and stole his insurance payouts. The apartment he claimed I stole from him isn't the apartment I live in. The cherry on top of this lack of the sundae is the part where he accused me of throwing dog piss water on him. An actual water bottle filled with a mixture of dog piss and water. That's the best guess I have to as what dog piss water is. First, he claimed I threw it up at him while I was standing on the sidewalk and while he was on the stoop. Then he claimed I was on the fire escape above him and literally poured the water on him from above. Thankfully, the cops knew immediately that this was a lie because I guess no actual crime had been committed. All they could do was tell Oz to go away. He was not happy about that, but he did. I had hoped that Oz would not come back after that, but sadly I was wrong. He did come back just one last time. A few days later, it's the middle of the day and I'm walking downstairs to inhale fire again. And as I step outside, I see two cops, Oz and one of my downstairs neighbors. Oz and my neighbor are separated and giving statements to the cops. When my neighbor is done, his name is John, by the way, I go up to him and ask him what happened. John then shows me his elbows, both scraped up and lightly bleeding. One of his knees is also lightly cut up. Oz also has a couple of bruises and light cuts on him. John tells me that he was trying to enter the building earlier. Oz was standing right outside and tried to force his way in. John stopped him and tried to tell him to leave. The two then got into a small fight and the cops were called. I decide to sit outside with John while everything is being figured out, and while John is waiting for his wife, a nurse, to get home and look him over. The manager of the building is called and helps the cops to look at the security camera footage for the front of the building. After looking at it for about 10 minutes, the cops and manager return. Sadly, the fight took place outside of view of the cameras, so it became a case of he said. So all the cops can do is tell Oz to leave once again. Since then, I have not seen Oz anywhere near my building yet. A sign has been put up outside the building stating, "This building is not open to the public. No one authorized entry," which is both comforting and disconcerting. This story took place in early 2017. I had recently moved from a major city to a small town in the Midwest to get myself together and separate myself from bad habits I had developed. Previously, I had been living on the West Coast and worked for a couple who were pot farmers, just trimming their weed for one season with a few other trimmers. Nothing major stuck out to me other than the guy, mid-30s, was a major jerk and super protective of his weed. And his girlfriend was somebody I wouldn't normally get along with, but she was alright. So I trimmed their weed that season and they paid me a portion up front. They, implying he really, said the rest would come after he sold a few pounds or whatever, because that was just how the business went. They did end up paying me within a few weeks, so all was good with me. However, the man here kept texting me after I moved mid-country with random, "Hey, how are you doing?" I never liked the guy. I got bad vibes from him from the get-go, but his wife or girlfriend was a friend of a close friend, so I sort of gave them the benefit of the doubt. Anyway, the wife or girlfriend started messaging me via text nearing spring, after I had worked for them trimming weed that fall season, asking if I would be available to house sit for them while they were on vacation out of the country. At this point, I was living in Colorado and the farm was in California. I did not have a permanent job set up yet, and they were offering good money to house sit plus make some extra money trimming weed they had left over from the season. Stupidly, I drove my ass 17 hours with dollar signs in my eyes, and all was hell from there. I would like to write out something long and detailed and make this like a horror story, but the gist of it is that somebody was there at the house the entire time I was house sitting. I will try and set up the scenario for you the best I can. They have a full house with a gardener's quarters attached to their main house. There is one bedroom and a bathroom and an electric stove/kettle/kitchen area in the gardener's bedroom. There is also a doorway from this area into the main house, blocked by a bookshelf on my side. When they invited me to stay and house sit, they were only there for 2 to 3 days, and part of their stay included drilling the door shut on the opposite side so that I could not enter their house. That didn't bother me, and I honestly understood why they may lock up their house, but things got really freaking weird afterwards. I had been there alone for a few days, just trimming weed, walking the dogs, and filling the hummingbirds' feeders, and watching the house like I was supposed to. Honestly, this house was in the middle of nowhere, so I don't even think anyone would have come there anyway. The girlfriend or wife would call from Morocco every so often to check up on me. I thought everything was fine, until I started to hear water running from the kitchen, inside of the house. The part of the house that I had no access to but was directly connected to. I immediately called the couple, or texted them maybe, and told them I could hear someone in their house. Their response was literally, "It is none of your concern what you hear on the other side of that wall." You guys, this turned to my stomach. I was in the middle of nowhere, locked by a gate on their property, hired to house sit, and all of a sudden it was not my concern if somebody was inside their house. It freaked me out. I still had 2 more weeks to be at this place, and without phone service, I was properly freaked out. Over the next few days, I would feel scared and calm in waves. At one point, I was sitting outside with the dogs, and they all ran up to the side of the house, wagging their tails like they were greeting somebody, and I heard a very quiet shh, and footsteps patter off. I continued to hear the TV/microwave, or water running from the main part of the house. The language of the girlfriend or wife was using with me via text was too personal in regard to what I was doing. I mean, sure, they could have had a camera installed, although I scorched the room for any devices, but the sounds and even the dogs reacting to what I heard were enough for me. Once I realized that I was house sitting, but also being spied on in some weird way, I started to have fun with it. I don't know if I figured that I was going to die anyway, or maybe that I acted crazy enough they wouldn't want me for whatever their purposes were. But one night, I was out on the small porch and steps area having a late night cigarette. It had to be 11 o'clock, or close to midnight, and I could hear somebody walking around the perimeter of the house. I stood up, opened the door to the gardener's quarters, and closed the door, as if I had walked back inside, but I just opened the door and closed it to give that impression, keeping my same position with the cigarette on the porch. Immediately, somebody walked from the side of the house because they thought I went inside, noticed me, and then ran into the woods. In my mind, I set up a tiny trap to see if I was delusional, and I proved that I wasn't. So I started doing crazy dumb stuff because I was alone. Nothing too wild, just blasting Backstreet Boys, set up their garbage cans like a drum set, and walked around topless. Honestly, I thought that if these people were crazy enough to freaking watch me while I house sat for them, I had to do something more ridiculous to push them away. Maybe that doesn't make sense, but I can't help but reference the Hey Arnold episode where a bully is after him and he says, "Don't hit me. I'll hit me. I'm crazy." Anyway, the couple finally came back to their house from Morocco and acted like they didn't want to pay me. They did after some pulling and tugging, but man, don't ever go house sitting and not really know the people you're house sitting for in the Emerald Triangle, or maybe just don't go there. It's a really shady business. I and my roommate, both females late 20s and best friends, just moved into this apartment, and yesterday was our 1-month anniversary of living here. It's in the greater Toronto area. A great neighborhood and a little touristy. Not a bad area at all. The building is in great shape but old, and many of the tenants have told us they lived here for 20 years or more. We were assured the locks were changed before we moved in. I have a key, as does my roomie. The old couple that takes care of the building, 60s, and the general maintenance guy. I was the last to leave the apartment around 8 a.m. and I locked the door. My roomie got home around 4:30 p.m., unlocked the door, changed, and left again to run some errands. We both got home again around 6 p.m. The first thing I did was go to my room to change out of work clothes, and I noticed that my closet looked messy. I had a small box of knickknacks like notebook, tissue paper, lip gloss, keychain, junk drawer stuff that looked like it had fallen out into the floor of my closet. However, the box was then put back up, and some of my dirty clothes from a basket were inside. It looked like somebody had rummaged through my dirty laundry and tossed clothes out of their way, which probably caused the box full of stuff to fall in the first place. On top of that, brand new clothes I had just purchased were still hung up, but hanging inside the box, like somebody was quickly sliding clothes in the clothing bar and it flipped some into the box. Because I'm very neat and tidy, I knew right away that this was not right. I did not do this, so I began to rationalize. Did my roommate do this? No, why would she? She wouldn't. If she needed something, she would ask. Did I do this? Maybe I threw my pants in the closet and they landed in the box. Maybe I did leave this stuff on the floor. Oh well, pretty weird, but anyways, that was essentially my inner dialogue. Cut to about 9:45 p.m. I'm in my room and all of a sudden I hear my roommate call my name, loudly and in a tone of voice I've never heard from her before. I go to her room and she says, "I found the gift you left me." I say I don't understand. The present in my pillow. I look at her from the hall and say I have no idea what she's talking about. Go into her room and on her bed is a freaking dildo. Mine at that. I grab it and say, "That's mine. Why is it in here?" She says, "It was in my pillow. You didn't put it there?" I tell her it was mixed in with my laundry basket. That's where I leave it to remind myself to wash it within a day or so. Now the wheels are turning and things are coming together. Somebody must have left themselves into our apartment with a key, gone into my room, looked through my dirty laundry, found the sex toy mix in there, and put it inside her pillowcase so she'd find it when she went to bed. After being in shock for a few minutes, the reality sunk in and I started to cry. Someone had access to her apartment for at least the last month. We decided to talk to the building managers, the old couple, and while they seemed to want to comfort me, because I was an emotional mess, the husband mostly played it down, saying it was probably a joke. Not funny at all, and asking if we gave a copy of the key to anyone. Nope, never. I think it was part culture or age that made them downplay it. We did call the cops and they came within an hour or so. They took all of our info, we told them the full story, and they had a look around. Honestly, they couldn't do much, and I figured that. At least we had a paper trail, though. I definitely mentioned the handy guy name as the one they should talk to. They were going to follow up with some residents and the building staff. I also watched the property manager. Old guy, sweet, and that handyman changed my locks this AM. If anything seems out of place, then it's very clear it's either the staff or somebody who has access to their apartment/keys. We're getting a camera that we can attach somewhat discreetly, and hopefully it never catches anyone that shouldn't be in our apartment. This little story is from 2012. I live in Canberra, Australia. We are an incredibly boring place 99% of the time. Not much happens, but when it does, everybody hears about it. I just started year 11 at a new school. The last 2 years of high school are done at a separate school, which we call college, for years 7 to 10. Everyone's between about 16 and 18 at this campus. I was an overachiever when it came to English, so I was placed in a class of 6 or 7 other overachievers in an experimental English class taught by the deputy principal in charge of my grade. Basically, rather than physical books and assignments, the school wanted to trial a totally digital format, which I hated. We worked almost exclusively on our personal iPads that we had to bring to each lesson. Even though the class was small, I don't remember much about most of the kids. They weren't particularly interesting, I guess. I kept to myself after the collapse of my high school friendship group and sat next to the other quiet kid in this particular class. I'll call him Jimbo. Jimbo was even quieter than me. I got myself in trouble a couple of times for challenging the teacher's views, but I honestly do not remember this guy ever saying a word. One lesson, for some reason that escaped me, we were discussing our pets. Jane talked about her cat, Bob about his dogs, whatever. It was one of the few times I contributed without challenging the teacher even. Jimbo still said nothing, just flicking idly through his iPad and leaning back on his chair, as he very often did. A couple weeks into the year, I finally found a few friends to hang out with on breaks. Jimbo was absent from class, and then the next and the next. This kid just disappeared, and after a couple of weeks, I asked the deputy where he was. This dude hated me, so he literally just rolled his eyes, shoved past, and said nothing. I shrugged it off because I knew the teacher was a dickhead, but I was still curious. I brought it to my new mates, because it's not common around here for kids to just stop showing up. We're a small city, so someone always knows something. If he'd moved schools, somebody would have heard. There had to be some explanation for the sudden extended absence. One of my new buddies took me aside. I'll call him Jerry. Jerry was a good, goofy dude. He was the type to always joke around, so when he pulled me aside all serious, I knew something was wrong. Jerry and Jimbo had been friends back at their old high school. At some stage over the summer holidays, when Jerry had visited him, Jimbo spilled a glass of milk in his kitchen. Jerry laughed about it, but Jimbo demanded he clean it up, even though Jerry obviously wasn't the one who made the mess. Jerry turned his back, and the next thing he knew, Jimbo had a knife to his throat and made him clean up the spill at knife point. But it gets worse, so much worse. He tells me Jimbo's iPad wasn't full of just schoolwork. Jerry tells me that Jimbo's iPad was absolutely packed with videos. Videos of him doing the most disgusting, subhuman things to animals, primarily dogs. I physically can't bring myself to write the specifics of what he did to the poor souls. Think the BTK killer, but without people. He'd been stealing them from backyards and luring strays. There was even a teacher at the school who had come out to find out why his dogs were going crazy so late and saw Jimbo scamper off into the night. There was a vast paddock, not far from the school that I used to smoke weed in because the grass was tall enough to keep us relatively well hidden from the rest of the world. Absolutely huge, a good kilometer square if not more. That paddock, I learned, had been his killing fields. I was just getting high in the opposite corner, closer to the houses that lined one side. If we decided to venture diagonally across for whatever reason, we were very possibly going to come across something he'd done. The iPad he recorded it all on had been less than a foot away from me for weeks. He flicked through the images of what he'd done so casually in that little classroom of 6 or 7 students. He knew that each of us had pets. He also had a bucket list found on the iPad, the top item of which was graduating to killing humans. From what I know, Jimbo was convicted for animal cruelty and nobody's heard of him since. As a wild teenager, I had my fair share of lucky misses. This one in particular scared me to my core. I was at a friend's house one evening and we were all getting stoned and drinking. I was wearing a white miniskirt, a glittery halter top, and knee-high white-heeled boots. At around 12 a.m., I knew I had to be home, but there was no one sober enough to drive me. I asked my friend for a hoodie and some pants, and then I decided to walk 30-plus minutes to my house alone. I had done this walk many times, so it felt safe enough to do so. Except I hadn't done it at midnight alone. Within the first 10 minutes, I passed the main intersection with no issues, and as I'm about to walk around the corner down the main road into my area, a large green van pulls up beside me. Me being stoned and paranoid, of course, my fingers automatically dialed 111, New Zealand's police number. As I dialed for the police, a young Islander man jumped out of the passenger seat and yelled at me to get in the van. At this very moment, I had my phone to my ear and the operator picked up and asked, "Fire, ambulance, or police?" I replied, "Police, please." Upon hearing this, the young man jumped back into the van and they sped off down the road. I continued to tell the operator a man just tried to get me into his van and that I was stoned walking home. I ended the phone call because I knew I needed to keep my battery from dying as I still had 20+ minutes to go before I reached my house. At this point, I'm clearly terrified and my stoner paranoia is at an all-time high. I mean it. This is a long, straight road with only 2 bends in it. However, you can see most of the road from anywhere on the footpath. After the van incident, I started to jump into driveways and hide behind bushes whenever I saw headlights. After doing this consistently for about 15 minutes, I started noticing a white sedan had passed at least 3 times. Thinking I must be seeing things, I continued to hide whenever I saw headlights and made my way closer and closer to my street. I finally reached the empty paddock opposite the primary school, and I saw headlights again. Thinking on my feet, I quickly jumped over the 6-foot fence into the open paddock. There was a massive tree in the middle of the paddock, so I ran and hid behind it. A minute or so later, the white Toyota sedan pulled over directly in front of the paddock fence, and full 5 grown men jumped out of it. The first thing they say was, "Where is she?" They started searching the street for me and were peering over the fence into the paddock. Panicked and absolutely crapping my pants, I dialed the police again. Once I got the operator, I just kept repeating my name, address, and current location. The operator finally calmed me down enough to ask me what was happening. I told her 5 men in a white sedan out on the street were searching for me as if they wanted to kidnap me. I knew they were looking for me as I was the only person walking the street at that time. She told me the police were on their way and to remain hidden. Finally, I heard the police sirens. They drove straight past the men and they all scattered back in the car and fled. By this time, I'm pretty sure I actually wet myself and I'm bawling my eyes out to the operator saying they drove straight past. Suddenly, I hear a man saying, "Hello, excuse me, are you okay?" I was silent. The man said, "Were those men looking for you?" "I live across the street and I could hear you crying." I peered out from behind the tree and said, "Yes, are they gone now?" He said, "Yeah, when the police went past, they fled." He then offered to take me to his house and keep me safe until the police came. So I hung up on the operator and climbed the fence and went into this dude's garage. Turned out to be a lovely guy, just working on his car in the garage a few doors down from the paddock. He offered me a warm drink and a cigarette to calm my nerves. After 10 minutes, it became evident the police weren't coming, so he dropped me off at home. At that age, I was young and dumb, and I definitely would have gotten kidnapped if I hadn't been a paranoid stoner with a true crime passion. So I was living 2 hours north of my hometown right after college, but came back down on the occasional weekend to stay with family. It wasn't unusual for me to go jogging while I was visiting, and on this particular weekend, I had actually remembered to bring my running shoes. So off I went. Now, where I grew up is a small farming community, and everything is laid out in 1 mile square blocks, with some of them cut in half on occasion. So I begin running, and I go for 1 mile and take the left turn and run for a half mile to where one of the occasional half-mile roads is, before turning around and starting home. Right as I reach the turnaround point, a car slows and a guy asks me, "Are you okay in this rain?" I'm startled and I respond that yes, I'm fine, thank you. They leave and I see them turn down the half-mile road. I'm a bit unsettled because I hadn't known the guy and it was barely raining, not even worth being called the drizzle. Then imagine my surprise when the same car comes up behind me again. They keep going, but I see them pull to the side and park just past the intersection next to a field. Now I'm concerned. Fortunately, there's a large dairy farm on one of the corners, so I know there's people around. My uncle's house is also close. My route had me turning right where there are scattered houses, but had I been continuing straight and past the car, there would have been no houses on either side for half a mile, just fields. I make my turn, sprint to my uncle's, and call my dad to come pick me up right now. I tell him and my mom what happened, and they get worried because a lot of our neighbors run that way. In fact, my mom had just seen one of them start a run. She hops back in the car and goes and stops my neighbor and explains what I just experienced, and the neighbor asks her for a ride back. Meanwhile, I text my other neighbor and let her know. Now this neighbor happens to be former law enforcement. She quickly calls me and asks what the car looked like, so I explained. Turns out the same car had just stopped and talked to her 11-year-old daughter while she was out in the yard. She told me she was going to call a friend and would I be willing to talk to them. I agreed. Turns out the guy had just gotten out of jail. For what, I wasn't told, and was on parole and was not supposed to be hanging out in our area. Found out he also had stopped another neighbor when she was jogging too, and she said he kind of backed off when he saw her phone with her. Really glad I brought my phone that day. So a few years ago, I was coming back to work after taking some time off after an operation. I left a regional role for a contract, one that meant a lot less traveling. It meant leaving a job I loved, but meant I could remain in transport/facilities management at a senior level. For a while it was great, but this was nothing like my previous role, and I met an engineering supervisor named James. He was super helpful and 28 years older than me. It started with friendly wanting to sit together over lunch and taking breaks the same time as me. I like to think I was a good manager, so I would bring coffee in there for the guys on a Friday, but I did this randomly at all the sites. Sometimes coffee, sometimes pizza. Then when I was coming through the garage, he'd stop me in front of all the engineers and hug me. They'd make jokes about how sweet it was, as he was an older guy and they all thought it was sweet. I pulled one of the other managers and said, "Don't you think it's a bit full on?" I was 30 at the time and just felt like he was super friendly. I was trying to fit in. This guy says to me, "He's an old man, lighten up." He'd started to follow me around the depot. The guy started drawing hearts on his coffee cups and it just became a huge joke. I carried my own phone in a company one, and he texted quite late asking if I was having a good night, if I was out with my friends and all that. All pretty harmless, but after 12 months of being there, I nipped in on a Saturday and was trying to catch up on work, and he came in. Said he'd seen my car and wanted to know if I wanted company. Stayed a while and said I'd be coming out for drinks next week. I had said, "Oh, I think it was just the management team going," and he said, "Yeah, but I checked in with Director Dick, and he says a few engineers are coming too." That night he touched me, declared he and his disabled wife no longer had sex, and basically thought we should hook up. I was taken aback, said no. Left and told my husband, who said basically he told me so. I had been telling him all along it was a bit creepy how fond he was, and the guys were always making fun of me about it. I approached my director and explained, and he asked if I was on my period to be this moody about banter. I started working from the other sites more and stopped going for drinks with colleagues, as everyone kept saying how much happier he was and how it was just a crush. I left a meeting and he went. I'll jump in the car with you, as the others all split. I tried to disagree, but the others said they were heading to another site, so we should just have gotten together. He sent me pictures and told me he loved me. I didn't see the point in reporting this, as it's a boys' club, and my director had made it clear I needed to suck it up. It was becoming harder and harder as I couldn't block his number, though. It was a work phone. I hated going into work, and the rumors were fueled by him. The final straw was when he turned up in a full kilt get-up, where my girls and I were having a drink and joined us. My husband was going mad, and I said I would leave. It just wasn't worth it. There were other issues with this company, and I knew I wasn't going to be staying. I took some time off over Christmas, and I could bore you with other ways he made my life hell. I would do inspections and end up trapped in the pit with him. He agreed to run a charity run I was doing, so we'd be away overnight together, so I pulled out. I got a job offer for a smaller company, with the guy who ran it being a belter. He was very family-oriented and really passionate about engineering. Although this was a huge pay cut and losing my car, I was seriously considering it. I returned in January and got pulled in by the director. I sat down and started to explain to him how well we had done, how well the staff were, and that I had finished the contract bid and got it signed. He cut me off and told me there had been a complaint. James, his wife, had contacted HR and told them. I had booked hotels on my company card and had nights away with her husband and all kinds of crazy stuff. Sobbing down the phone and saying that I was going to be investigated. There was also an allegation of handling stolen goods and having alcohol on site. I could have cried. They carried out their investigation and he decided he would ignore me, be rude and dismissive to me in front of staff, and generally go on like a horrid person. I waited for the BUPA team to come and breathalyze me and carry out a drug test. The investigation showed I had it, and the supervisor that gave me the wine as a gift for my husband helping him with his decorating stuck up for me. Also, most of the management team who worked for me and engineers did go to bat for me, but I handed my notice in. He didn't speak to me, but then the messages started. His wife had found me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. She was messaging my husband in all kinds. At first, I tried to ignore it, as I had a leave date for 3 weeks' time and just thought I would be away from this nightmare. Then she stepped it up and contacted my future employer, meaning the director had mentioned to someone where I was going. My new employer was amazing and told me to contact the police. I think I just wanted to stop being embarrassed, so I hadn't even thought about that, but I did. They said they couldn't really do a lot as they hadn't threatened me, and I cried, telling them I could prove where I was when I was supposedly with her husband. The officer was amazing and said he could go have a word. It then got super crazy, and his daughter sent me and my husband messages. These were threats, and the officer went back out. Then it all went quiet. One of the guys from my old job contacted me and said, "You know, he was seeing someone else. When he got caught and saw the messages he had sent to you, he didn't want to admit to another, so he said yeah." He could have blown up my entire life, and I know it now at 33, that I wouldn't take this kind of nonsense again. I still work for the family guy, but I am super careful. I don't go for drinks when the team does, and I don't joke with them and probably come across like a dull shite. But I don't want to ever meet him or go through anything like this again. I know there were things I could have done differently, and there are so many things I missed out on. This dude was nuts. I'm grateful I left with my reputation intact as everyone, but the guy who came up every 9 months did. James was technically working for the client, which is probably why the director just wanted it to go away. This happened about 2 years ago when I was 22. After work, I stopped at a local convenience store to buy beer. The cashier looked familiar, but it's a very small town, population of like 6,000. He acted odd. I asked how he was doing to make small talk, and he just stared at me. I instantly felt uncomfortable, so I only glanced at him a few times before I left. I arrived home 10 minutes later and decided to browse Facebook. I had a friend request. The guy looked familiar. He was a local, so I accepted him. A few hours later, I realized it was the cashier. He'd gotten my name off my ID and added me not even 5 minutes after I left. I told my boyfriend. We agreed it was weird. A few days later, he came into my work. I asked my boss. She'd never seen him in there before. He grabbed milk and initiated small talk with me. I felt uncomfortable. He asked if I remembered him and told me his name and that we'd been good friends in high school. We never said 2 words to each other. I was trying to be polite and told him yes, I remembered. After a few minutes, my boss pulled me in the office. She was watching through the window and could tell I was uncomfortable. It was a small pharmacy and we were all close. He started coming in every few days. If I weren't there, he'd ask for me. After a few weeks, my boss would pull me in the office whenever he'd walk in. All the managers were briefed and did the same. That was all they could do until something happened. Then he stopped coming in. We didn't see him for a few weeks. I was relieved and went about business. I was allowed to carry my cell phone on the floor. My mom was very sick, so if she needed anything, the managers were fine with her calling me. I got a text from a random number shortly after. I asked who it was and they replied, "You don't remember? You gave me this number. It's my stalker. I'll call him George." My heart started pounding. I sent a polite short message back. After I worked, I checked to see if my phone number was anywhere on my Facebook. It wasn't. George started messaging me daily, calling me sexy or babe. I was freaked out to say the least. My boyfriend was working out of town with limited cell reception, so I couldn't let him know what was going on. A few days later, I got a message from an old classmate I still talk to once in a while. "Hey, did George ever get a hold of you? He said there was an emergency and he needed to contact you. Is everything alright?" Finally acknowledging that yes, I was being stalked. I didn't know if he was violent and he knew where I worked, so I sent him something like, "Hey, I just wanted to let you know that I have a boyfriend. I didn't want there to be a misunderstanding." That's when it got bad. He called me a liar and a stupid whore, telling me he doesn't know why my ugly ass would even think he was interested in me, and that no man would be interested in a nasty woman like me. I asked him to leave me alone. The insults got worse. I shut my phone off, cried, and tried to ignore him. A few hours later, after calming down, I turned it back on and hesitantly checked. The last message he sent: "You're pure evil. I know where you work. I know where your house is. I could kill you in your sleep and you wouldn't see it coming. Try to call the cops on me. I'm in New York right now. They can't protect you." Obviously not as legible. I could tell he was really mad when he wrote it. I called a friend and explained. Showed her the text. She took me down to the police station where I showed them the texts. I was shaken. I filed a report and later got a restraining order against him. Turns out he already had 2 other restraining orders from girls he'd done this to as well. My boyfriend came back a week later. I told him what happened and had to stop him from hunting that sick weirdo down. Last year, he tried getting my number from a friend over Facebook. She blocked it. I haven't seen or heard from him since, thankfully. There have been very few times in my life that I've been scared. You hear about stuff like this on the news or in documentaries, but never think it can happen to you. I slept with the light on for months. My English isn't the best, so please bear with me. This happened to me when I was around 8 or 9 years old in the Philippines, and to this day it still haunts me. Every year, I and my family would always go on a vacation in our province, and we would always celebrate Christmas and New Year's there. Our house is somewhere on the mountains, so trees and other stuff in nature are expected to be seen. One night, I and my mother were arguing about something. I can't remember what it was, and around 11 p.m. to 12 a.m., I was so mad that I decided to run away in tears, and I was not paying attention to where I was heading. I stopped at a tree to take away my anger and to calm myself down. After some time, I decided to go back. When I looked around, that's when I realized I was lost in the forest. I don't know how much time had passed, but I was pretty calm until I heard a sound from behind. It sounded like ground being shoveled by someone. I looked behind to see nothing. At this point, my heart is starting to race. I can feel the adrenaline flowing over me. I was stupid back then, so I called out, "Is anyone there?" The sound stopped, so I thought to myself I was imagining things. So then I started to walk. I then heard the sound again, but this time I heard footsteps and was pretty sure I heard it well. When I turned around, I saw a shadowy figure behind the tree, and that's when my fight or flight started kicking in. I was so scared that I froze there watching it, which was a horrible idea, I know. It felt like an eternity standing there in silence, and when the figure moved, I started running for my life and shouting for help. Just like in any other horror movie, I fell to the ground. The sound started to get so loud that they hurt my ears. It was a scream from a person. I stood up quickly as I could and ran as fast as possible. Fortunately, I found the way back to my house, crying and terrified. When I got home, I told them everything that had happened to me, and they didn't believe me at all. At first, until our neighbor rushed into our house to inform us that a dead body was found in the forest. A farmer found it when he was about to go home. He immediately called the police and they inspected the dead body. The very next day, they continued to investigate the area and they found the dead body in pieces. The body was never identified since the killer removed the teeth. After we found out what happened, we left the place really fast. Since then, we've never heard from him, and I don't know if they ever found the killer or not. Despite the incident, the place was never a good place to stay, so we never came back. My parents were so happy that I managed to escape from a killer. I apologized to my mother and vice versa. We are all living happy now, and we stopped talking about it and left it in the past. This might not be as scary as other stories on here, but it gives me the heebie-jeebies. My uncle was the main male figure in my life growing up, as I had a single mom. He was always a bit out there, but to me, I thought of him as just my crazy uncle and I trusted him. However, this changed pretty quickly after this story. My uncle owned a boat, and he used to take me and my siblings out around where we lived in Australia. 14-year-old me had been awkwardly talking to my crush before going back to the boat. My uncle started pestering me straight away, asking me who he was and if he was my boyfriend. I thought it was weird and told him so. I was being sassy, but he took it in a way I didn't expect and seemed genuinely annoyed. We got into an argument and I ended up leaning over the side of the boat, sulking. He told me several times to stop it. Suddenly, he pushed me and held me underwater. I thought it was a bad joke at first, but he held me under for way too long. I started panicking and my vision was blurring. He then let me go and started laughing at me. I was obviously terrified and upset and immediately told my mom, but my uncle said that I was lying and just wanted attention. My mom didn't believe me. I never trusted him after this, and I still have a bad fear of water. I'd always blamed myself for what happened on the boat because I was talking back to him. My crush ended up becoming my boyfriend, and he never liked my uncle either and told me so. My uncle always ended up picking fights with him. I have twin sisters who are around 2 years younger than me. Because I'm the big sis, I used to shelter them from him the best that I could, but they were old enough to know what was up. It wasn't a normal relationship between me and my uncle, and he used to call me dumb to my face but tell others that I was naive and immature for my age. He also used to play fight with us a lot. On more than one occasion, he pulled us off onto his lap and tickled us and wouldn't let go until we literally had to fight him to get off. I and my sisters tried not to speak to him, obviously, but he still tries to contact us. He's not related to us by blood, but it doesn't make it any better. My aunt, mom's sister, also told me that he and his brother were arrested in the late 80s or early 90s for threatening to shoot their brother's ex-girlfriend. I don't know the full story behind that, but I'm 19 now and I'm so angry that I've never reported him or told anyone apart from friends. I still panic when water is over my head. This happened about 7 years ago when I was 16, and I'd all but forgotten about it until a few weeks ago when my mom brought it up. I grew up in a rural town in Australia. My house was 30 minutes out of town with 20 acres of thick bushland behind it and a driveway that was about a 5-minute drive on its own. The neighbor's house shared the driveway but was surrounded by 5 acres, so incredibly isolated to say the least. It always felt like a really safe place because it was so far away from other humans, but of course that always comes with its own downsides. Nobody can hear you scream, but no one can hear you scream. In 2012, my brother graduated high school and my folks got sick of being so far out, decided to rent the house out and move closer to town. But then my mom was so used to not having neighbors that it annoyed the heck out of her. We once heard a neighbor sneezing and that was the last straw. So a year later, end of lease, we moved back, but this time without my brother who was settled in at uni. When we went back, we moved into our original rooms and put all the furniture back how it was, more or less. My room was the only one on the left side of the house. I chose it for the view of the shed, which used to have chickens, ducks, and alpacas roaming around it. But the room felt different somehow, like it wasn't mine anymore. Instead of swapping rooms and having to do all my posters and stuff again, I just started sleeping with the light on. The only other thing that was different was the renters had left a horse float in a caravan in the paddock next to the shed. I couldn't have cared less, but Mom was calling the renters every other week to get them to move out ASAP. Also, at this time, my dad was working with a mining company and installing a pipeline to an island off the east coast, so he was away for 4 weeks at a time, then home for 2 weeks, etc. So onward to the point. One night when my dad was away at work and it was just me and Mom at home, I was exhausted and went to bed really early. Ended up having the absolute worst dream of my life. I was kind of a little shit at the time, being a 16-year-old girl, but I barely spoke for the next few days. It had truly shaken me to my core. It started with my dog barking as she would, for the entire 5 minutes, anybody was coming down the driveway. I went out to get her, but it was pitch black. I could only just see her standing at the edge of the grass by the drive, and She was standing really aggressively in a way I only ever saw her do to kangaroos and the neighbor's dog. I started hearing footsteps crunching on the pebbles, then male voices coming from either side of the house. The dog was now running from left to right, going absolutely apeshit, then getting gradually closer to me like they were closing in, and she was trying her hardest to protect me. I was trying to scream, but the only sound I could make was that of a labored breath, and I was completely paralyzed with fear. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but they were laughing to each other and whispering. This kept going on for what felt like an eternity, the mysterious male voices getting closer and closer, but never coming out of the shadows enough for me to know who they were. Eventually I woke up. It wasn't like a movie where I jumped up and was out of breath. I was lying in bed like a dead pharaoh, and my eyes opened like I had never been asleep, only blinked. After a few days of acting weird, Mom finally asked me what was up. She's not talkative, so she asked it offhandedly and wasn't looking at me. As I told her, she stopped what she was doing and looked at me like I'd just spoken in tongues. Turned out the night I had the dream, shortly after I went to bed and just before sunset, 2 guys rocked up to the house saying they were there to collect the horse float. The dog went bananas at them, which was only strange because normally as soon as you were close to her, she'd fall on the ground and demand belly scratches. Mom didn't recognize these guys as anyone in the group or family that rented from us, but they knew about this stuff, and Mom wanted it gone, so she put the dog on her lockup and took them to it. One of them took it upon themselves to take a walk around the back of the house, parallel to the shed, behind the dog lockup, then came back and pointed out that there was only one car in the driveway and that he had noticed before there was a van. Whose van was it? She even said something like, "Husband not home tonight?" while looking at my window with light coming through the curtains. To say the least, Mom was freaked out. How do you know how many cars we have when she's never met either of them before? In an instant, she thought they must have come around before, seen 2 cars and gone away. Following the man's gaze to my room, she let out a relaxed laugh and said Dad was in there cleaning his guns. But he's probably done now, and she'll go get him to help so he can help with the float. The most intense weapon my dad has ever owned is a rusty machete, so I have no idea where that came from on my mom's end, but I'm eternally glad for it. They protested and said they could manage it, but she bolted inside, locked all the doors, and then stood by the front window with a knife and watched them drive away without the horse float. When Dad got home a week or so later, he called their renters up in a fit of rage and found out they hadn't sent anyone to go get it for them, but all their friends knew it was there because they'd been trying to organize help to get bolted one day. Purely because I was sleeping with a light on at the time it happened, and because I went to bed early that night, my mom and I escaped a potentially seriously horrific situation. Because you just know if my dumb arse were there, I would have instantly declared, "Nope, just us home tonight."